Welcome to Art 110, Art Appreciation, or Focus on the Visual Arts. So this class is unusual in a couple of ways. If you haven't figured it out already, this is an online-only class, so our contact is going to be primarily through Canvas. We'll do a tour of Canvas. It will be through our online lectures, and it will be through email. This class is also a half-semester session class, so that means that our time is going to be precious for us. This is going to be on an accelerated pace. There will be quite a lot of time management that you're going to have to accomplish in order to make this class a success for you. So today's lecture is obviously not going to be live streamed. It's going to be uploaded. We're having a little bit of issues with the verification for YouTube for live streaming for the Wingit accounts, but hopefully that will be fixed by next class period. So I will go through you today a tour of the general rhythms and assignments for the class. We will talk about our introductory lecture for today, and then we will also discuss your first series of assignments as well as your materials that you should be using in this class as well, because even though this is online, there are some manual components that are going to go for you. So this will be your homepage right here. This right here, it should say Art 110, focus on the visual arts for you. This right here is just your syllabus. I'm not going to go through it all, but basically your overview for this class is we're going to be learning a little bit about art history, art practice, a little bit of art criticism, and some theory, and then you're also going to be working on communication. The core of this class, the main objective that I have for you, is to recognize how you are being visually communicated with in the general world, and then also to recognize how you yourself can communicate visually in an effective manner. So you will, of course, if you have completed this course successfully, have a pretty good understanding on an introductory level of visual communication, as well as some side things that will be benefits from this class, like time management skills, learning how to deal with open-ended or subjective questions, a lot of things like that. So there, of course, is that printable version for you if you need it in your syllabus. There's no textbook, but I will show you the file that we use in place of a textbook. And there are materials. Your materials will relate directly to your grade, so if you buy really kind of crappy, cheap materials in this class, you're going to find yourself wishing that you didn't have to spend so much time working on your stuff, because the higher the level of your materials are, the less time you spend working on something, and the higher your craftsmanship score winds up being. Of course, we are an online class. Your attendance is flexible. The only thing that's really not flexible are your due dates. So whenever something posts, you don't have to watch it immediately as soon as it posts. The only thing you have to do is watch it before any assignments that are relevant to that post are due. We have lots of assignments right here. My grading is on a 10-point scale. And then this is just a breakdown for you of all of the things that you need to do in order to succeed in this class. Title 9 and the honor code as well. Don't cheat in this class. Most of everything is open note, open resource, in terms of your exams, but I do want to hear what you yourself have decided on any of your projects or tests or quizzes, or I want to hear your opinions, your personal expressions of yourself. I don't want to hear what anyone else is having to say. So all of that is available. So you'll be mostly working from here. You'll be getting announcements from me through Canvas right here, so you can always see the latest ones. You can view your assignments, discussions, grades, any files that I've uploaded, and quizzes are all through there, but I think the most helpful organizer is if you always just go to modules. And in the modules, you have pretty much any course content that you would need. You've got your syllabus right there, links to the supplies that you'll need. We'll talk about those in depth at the end, but there are a a series of supplies that I recommend that you have to complete your projects for this class. Helpful links are good for your research papers. You'll have one research paper due every week. So you have all of those links to resources that are very good for helping you with research. You have your extra credit opportunity. This adds 5 extra points to your midterm exam and 5 extra points to your final exam if you do one response paper for each one. So this extra credit opportunity is a 1-page response to either a film on an art topic, to a lyceum visit, a cultural event, or watching a full episode of PBS's Art 21. So that is available for you. Your art history timelines are good resources for you to use during exams. Usually in exams or quizzes, a lot of times I'll give you a work of art to respond to, and you have to use your context clues to answer the questions that I'm asking about that work of art. So your art history timelines can help you with placements of work of art in history. And then this right here, your Sophia tutorials, is where your weekly vocabulary readings will all come from. So this PDF is going to be very important for you. It's a rather large file size. It's over 200 pages. 140 pages. And if you want to have a printout copy, you're more than welcome to print it out for yourself, but you can just use the digital copy. I'm actually going to come back to that at the end of our class. And then we have your Elements and Principles worksheets. You will have to print off a copy of this. This must be printed off so that you work on this physically every week starting next week on each individual project. And this can be downloaded and printed out. This one is only, I think, 12 pages long. So it won't be very expensive to print. And then at the end of the semester, you will need to scan and upload copies of each of your pages from that into the online portal. And then your Art 110 vocabulary list. This is the vocabulary words that you'll be responsible every week for each week's quiz. And the vocabulary words you'll be responsible for your final and your midterms exams. All right. And then every week after that, you will have a new module that will open up. And this one's week 1 and then week 2. And all of those will have that week's lectures, responses, and readings that you are responsible for. So for this first week, we'll talk about art. What is it good for? Already loaded right here. Also talk about your artist presentation, student learning objectives assignments, your options for that, your guidelines for the presentation. This is your first reading that you will need to read, and then your first response, and then your first quiz will be due at Friday. The first reading, we'll talk about that due date. We may change that. So that one you don't have to worry about uploading anything to. It's just being assigned to you for Wednesday. And then Friday, yes, your practice quiz and your response one, that's all correct. So let's talk about your presentation SLO assignment first, and then we'll jump into your lecture. So at the end of the semester, you will have a PowerPoint assignment due. This is sort of your final project for the class. This assignment is meant to be a combination of both research that you've done on the historical context and background of an artist, and it's also meant to demonstrate visually how you can communicate. So your PowerPoint presentation is going to demonstrate your ability to communicate visually using all the tools that you will learn over the course of this class. The presentation is based on 2 parts: the quality of information within and the visual communication of that material through your elements and principles of art. And this slideshow should meet the following requirements. It should be 7 to 9 total slides of content, plus one title slide and one bibliography slide where you'll list your sources. It needs to last 7 to 10 minutes in duration if you were to be giving that. What I'm going to be doing to be able to measure that 7 to 10 minutes is there will be a uploaded Word document with all of your speaker notes on that, and that should have 4 to 7 sentences per slide, and that's how I'll be timing your 7 to 10 minutes of duration. You'll discuss a minimum of 5 individual artworks made by that artist. Every artwork should have a caption that goes with it, and you should be introducing and defining at least 2 key informational words throughout your slide, including technique, concept, or form. So you'll want to introduce a vocabulary type term and then define it within your slideshow. And you'll have one participation question for the audience to answer, and a title slide with the name of the artist, their movement, you as the presenter, and the approximate life of the artist in years, and a bibliography slide at the end with a minimum of 3 sources. Since we won't be presenting in real time, you don't have to worry about signing up for time slot for this presentation. And then there are a list of helpful hints about do's and don'ts for the artist presentation SLO assignment. So let's do the guidelines for that artist presentation very quickly. So I'm going to briefly show you an overview slide. I'm not going to go into any of these things in great depth or detail. You can read these on your own. But basically, this presentation guideline exists in order to help you see what are the best choices when you are communicating with something visual. Because you can put, words on a screen, but do the things that you put on a screen actually help to boost your communication or take away from your communication? So you will have things that I will be evaluating you on in your presentation, whether that is line, shape, form. So let's just briefly go into this presentation. Line, the fonts that you're using, are they helping to communicate? Are you using line to direct attention? So you can see how in this slide, how much less line is being used than in this slide, where line is starting to be both a divider. The quality of the script reminds you of a certain period. You see the implied lines going into the canvas. Shapes, are you using shapes that are more geometric or more organic? What is your artist style? Are you representing your artist style? Are your images also good quality and not distorted? So you can see here how the images aren't very good quality. You can't really read what's happening here, whereas now it's very boxed off. It's much easier to see. Your shapes aren't overlapping one another. Your image quality is much better. Color, are you using a consistent color scheme? Do your colors enhance your views, or do they detract? Does it make it harder to see because of the color choices you use? Or are your colors and your values helping to create a specific and intentional mood? With light, is there enough contrast? Are the values appropriate? Is everything too dark for you to read? Or are they brighter colors? Do they remind you of a specific mood? Is the pacing of your presentation well thought out? Do you spend all of your time on one slide and not enough time on another slide? If you're using motion or graphics, are they appropriate in length? Do they last too long or last too little? If everything in your presentation moves, does it become distracting? When is it a good time to use movement? When is movement not perhaps the best thing? And when can tasteful use of movement, so something a little bit quicker, be a more appropriate use? So, texture, is your quality of your presentation good? Are your images of high quality? Again, are they too grainy or distorted? Do you have both zoomed in shots as well as overall shots? Are you communicating the material that the artist is using with your texture of your backgrounds, the repetition of the marble right here? Emphasis, are you creating emphasis on the most important part of your work? Unity and variety. Does the slide feel unified? Do the slides seem to go together? Or do they not feel like they match one another at all? And the scale and proportion. Is your text large enough? Are your images large enough, or are they too small for your space? So here you can see something where everything is kind of the same size. The image is very small. It's not very well balanced. Whereas here, now the image is much bigger. There is emphasis. There's the image right there, much larger. The emphasis is being placed on the important word. Some words that are not as important are de-emphasized. Everything just works a little bit more in unity or harmony together. And then the balance. Is your slide overly crowded? Is it too sparse? So you can see where there's a lot of text. A lot of people think that you need to put everything that you say onto the slide. That's actually a mistake. You want to pick only the most important parts of your text and then put them in the slide. Just the highlights. You don't have to have full sentences. Just the keywords, the key phrases are going to create a slideshow experience that doesn't feel overwhelming to your viewers. And then rhythm, pattern, and repetition. Are you providing new information on your new slides? Do you keep repeating the same thing over and over? Are you being consistent in your approach to the presentation? Is there a natural flow in the structure of your presentation? And those are some small things that you can do whenever you're doing a slideshow. You should see those things as well in my slideshows as I am presenting to you. So there's that. We'll go back to week 1. And then these are your artist options. So you will need to choose your top 3 artists. And that will be part of your quiz that you'll take at the, your practice quiz that you'll take for this week that's due on Friday. We'll open this up. And I will briefly again go through these lists of artists that are there for you to choose. If you have an artist that is well established enough to have information for you to research that is not on this list but you would like to do, you may send me their name through the quiz. That's fine, but you do have to have it approved by me before you just start working on them, because if I decide there's not enough information on them, you won't be able to do it on that artist. So I've selected a couple of artists for you to choose from that represent a lot of different fields and backgrounds. Here we have Emperor Huizong of Song, who was a Chinese emperor. A lot of courts in China really valued the arts as a well-rounded education, and so many emperors expressed themselves through some sort of art, whether it was music or poetry or painting. Leonardo da Vinci, considered to be the original Renaissance man, a very talented painter and also a scientist and an inventor as well. His contemporary Michelangelo, who was a painter, a sculptor, and an architect, another Renaissance thinker. Raphael, a Renaissance painter and fresco painter as well. So fresco being painting with plaster, which is a different experience than painting on a canvas due to the way that plaster works as a medium. And considered to be one of the great people who brought perspective and rational thinking to the forefront. Perspective being the depiction of 3D space on a 2D plane. So bringing that kind of geometry into full force in Renaissance painting. You have Caravaggio, a Baroque painter who is much more interested in using light and drama in his artworks. Artemisia Gentileschi, an Italian painter who had to fight a lot of abuse and injustices in the system because of her desire to create and to be a painter and to push for having credit for the work that she did. Gian Lorenzo Bernini was a Baroque sculptor known for his just extremely beautiful, very expressive sculptures. Rembrandt van Rijn, a Dutch painter who created very human, very personal images of his subjects rather than making them look, what we might say today as photoshopped or very idealized. He generally painted people in a very realistic, very gritty, you might say, manner. Jean-Honoré Fragonard, a Rococo painter, so he painted for the French court and the nobility, often painting scenes that were considered to be very frivolous and almost wasteful by the larger republic outside of the ruling classes. Mary Moser, a neoclassical artist, one of the first women to be accepted into the Royal Academy of the Arts in England, and again another trailblazer who really had to push to be able to have her work accepted. Francisco Goya, a Spanish painter who painted in the Romanticism era. Romanticism not just meaning love, but meaning any kind of high emotion. So in this particular case, all of the rebellions that were happening in Spain, and the people who were being crushed by the wheel, and the sort of high energy that was surrounding these events. Jacques-Louis David, a neoclassical era painter, so a painter very inspired by the Italian Renaissance and who sought to bring a revival of Greek ideas through the use of, again, balance, geometry, order, reason, and very Greek style stories and mythology. Canova, a neoclassical sculptor in this case, who again brought around the revival of Greek mythology in sculpture. Katsushika Hokusai was a ukiyo-e printmaker who was from Japan and painted this series of views of Mount Fuji. In this particular one, the Great Wave off of Kanagawa, you see how small Mount Fuji looks compared to the tsunami wave that came and hit the shores of Japan. Thomas Cole, another Romanticism artist. A lot of American Romanticists weren't so much interested in the emotionality of political events, but were much more influenced by the emotionality of being explorers in the Old West of the U.S. So this idea of the pioneer spirit and the beauty of the untamed American landscape drew artists like Cole. Millet, Jean-Francois Millet, was a realism artist, so he would paint scenes of the real world. So no longer was he interested in painting scenes of courts or kings or things like that. He wanted to paint real people, real workers doing real things in their lives. Bouguereau, an academic artist. So academic artists at this particular time are very interested in the things that neoclassical artists have been drawing to the front. So a lot of pictures of mythology, a lot of paintings of young women dressed in sort of the clothes of fairy tales and folk tales. Manet, a realist artist, again interested in painting real life and everyday life, not in adorning things, not in trying to hide flaws, but in painting the reality of experience. Pierre-Auguste Coe, one of the most popular academic artists, again known for painting very beautiful fairy tale scenes, but maybe not considered to be the most political of artists. Edgar Degas, an Impressionism painter interested in capturing the fleeting moment and also interested in capturing the lives of people who were not often seen. So in this case, the background dancers, the background ballerinas. He was not interested in painting the prima donnas or the stars of the stage, but interested in painting the people who worked behind the stage. Renoir painted, again in the Impressionist style, the qualities of light and the experiences of the everyday person having, a normal Saturday afternoon gathering. Cézanne, a post-impressionist artist, one of the first artists to really start to push towards abstraction, where things become a little bit more blocky, a little bit more geometric. We're starting to break away from this dedication to reality and starting to view artwork through the artist's creative eyes and his lens. His contemporary Monet, also an impressionist painter who pushed into abstraction and started becoming less and less and less about defined shapes and defined representation and more about the impression of a moment. Another impressionist artist, Mary Cassatt, very interested in the lives of people behind the scenes, the lives of everyday women with their children, and these are not often considered to be appropriate subjects during her lifetime for viewing in galleries and museums. These were considered to be too rough. Edmonia Lewis, Native American and African American artist who struggled because of her race with finding work in the United States, and therefore trained and had her career in Paris as a neoclassical sculptor. Vincent van Gogh, or Vincent van Gogh, a post-impressionist painter, known not just for his really breakthrough, very post-impressionist style, but also known for a series of mental issues that he struggled with through the course of his life. Henrietta Sala Tanner, a realism artist who brought the motivations of the earlier realists, which were more about class distinctions, and wanted to expose into racial distinctions through his portrayal of African Americans in an uplifted and dignified manner, which was not always the case for his contemporaries. Gustave Klimt, an Art Nouveau artist, very interested in decorations, patterns, all kinds of ornamentation in art, as was Alphonse Mucha, another Art Nouveau artist. A lot of artwork from the Art Nouveau era is both for fine galleries and museums and for things common as posters and advertising. So Art Nouveau is an art style that blends both commercial art and the fine arts. Henri Matisse, a post-impressionist and a Fauvist. Fauvism meaning wild beast. So his work tended to express itself almost violently sometimes, a real pushing away from the more natural styles that had been dominating the art world and the academic art world for centuries before him. Maida Warwick Fuller, a Harlem Renaissance sculptor. A Renaissance sculptor who used her bronze statues to highlight important issues that were going on during her day and to call for change and for social justice. You have Pablo Picasso, who was the father of Cubism, Symbolism, also was involved with Surrealism as well. A real big player in terms of a very long career, a very prolific career, and also someone who helped really jump that gap from more representational art to more abstract and symbolic art. His contemporary Georges Braque, also involved with the Cubism movement, the breaking apart of the planes of reality into something that is more fractured. You have Diego Rivera, the social realism artist, who takes the ideas of realism and really blends them with Marxist theory and socialist ideas and blends that political message along with the artistic styles. You have Sergeant Claude Johnson, a Harlem Renaissance sculptor as well, very influenced by looking into historic African art and reincorporating those styles and motifs into contemporary sculpture. Archibald Motley Jr., another painter of the Harlem Renaissance and also a very important and prolific mural painter as well. He painted the mural for the New York City's Harlem Library. Norman Rockwell, a kitsch painter, meaning that he painted scenes of sentimentality and of Americana, often considered to be in a lot of art circles as maybe being too cutesy and too pandering, but he did make a lot of artworks that were directly inspired by social events and like integration in this particular painting right here, and made calls for social change and justice as well. You have A.G. Rizzoli, an outsider artist, meaning that he made work during his lifetime strictly for his own benefit, and his work was not discovered until after he had already passed away. So an example of somebody who has an architect's training, but who is making artwork for his own desires and his own compulsions rather than for the art scene. Walt Disney, an animation artist. If you do choose Walt Disney as your person, you are restricted to only his first 5 films produced by his company or any works earlier than that. So the early Mickey Mouse shorts, or the Oswald the Lucky Rabbits, the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or his first 5 movies with the Walt Disney Company, those being Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, and Dumbo, because those are the 5 in which he was more of a heavily involved person, as opposed to later on when he became more involved with other projects. So Walt Disney, an animation artist. You have Mark Rothko, an abstract expressionist who worked with large scales of color to create his messages. Joseph Cornell, a surrealism artist who uses found objects that he puts together in these boxes to create small stories or puns for you to work out. Willem de Kooning, an abstract expressionist who used harsh brushstrokes and very gestural abstraction, so reducing of the form to symbols, to create his messages. You have Salvador Dali, who was a surrealism artist, meaning he explored the subconscious mind. He explored altered states of mind, whether those were induced by hallucinations or drugs, or through sleep or sleep deprivation even, or hypnosis. You have Frida Kahlo, a surrealism artist. Again, this one very influenced by her husband Diego Rivera and his social realism, and in her own works was very personal about her pieces, a lot of self-portraits, a lot of exploring herself and her body as a canvas for the things that she was experiencing in life. You have Jackson Pollock, a very influential abstract expressionist despite having a pretty short career due to an early death, who was very interested in communicating through action painting, which we will be talking about later. You'll have Merritt Oppenheim, a surrealist artist who worked a lot with sculpture and found objects. We'll be looking at a lot of her work throughout the semester. You have Roy Lichtenstein, a pop artist influenced by popular culture, comics, graphic novels, things like that. Margaret Keane, another kitsch painter who recently had a movie made about her by Tim Burton, who created these paintings called the Big Eyes paintings, and had a very famous court case that proved that she was the artist who'd been making them, because for decades it was her husband who claimed to make the work that she did. You have Helen Frankenthaler, another artist who for a long time was much less famous than her husband as a painter, but is now becoming more widely known and recognized for her own art. You have Solowit, a minimalist artist and sculptor who creates a lot of very large-scale sculptures, a lot of very industrial influence in his work. Andy Warhol, the artist who said everyone has 15 seconds of fame, very interested in popular culture and the effects of celebrity and fame on society. You have Miriam Schapiro, who's a feminist artist, very interested in the pattern decoration movement. So she reclaims a lot of materials and images that are more associated with crafts and more female fields of art, and she brings those back into the fine art context and considers those to be valid forms of expression for the art world as well. Yayoi Kusama, a contemporary artist who has been making for many, many decades at a very large scale rate because of her own personal compulsions and her own needs to just express herself visually through the process of making to help her own mental states. John Baldessari, a conceptual artist who really felt that the idea was more important than the object. We'll talk about how we got to that point throughout our classes, how we got to the idea where visual arts became more about something that you can't visually communicate very well than it did become about the things that you were using to visually communicate. So it's a bit of a catch-22. We have Yoko Ono, a conceptual artist and also a very influential feminist artist. She was much more than just, the one-time wife of John Lennon. She created a lot of pieces that brought to attention on a large scale the sort of double standards that were being held for women, and also brought to the front a often unheard voice in the West, which is the voice, of more Eastern ideas and philosophies. A lot of the ideas and guidance behind Buddhist thought as well. You have Richard Williams, another animation artist who was probably best known for his work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but has a beautiful work of art called The Cobbler and the Thief that is an actually unfinished film that he's been working on for about 30 years, and it's a very beautiful object as well. Judy Chicago, along with Miriam Schapiro, is one of the feminist artists who started the feminism movement of the 70s called Woman House, and has been making a lot of female-centric artworks that look back at the role of females through history. You have Mariana Abramovich, another conceptual feminist and contemporary artist known for pushing the limits with her artworks and trying to get her body to do things, or to set up social experiments wherein people would put them in social situations that were put to those limits as well. We'll look at her in depth in several lectures this year. There's also Annie Leibovitz, a contemporary photographer who took a lot of famous portraits throughout history, as well as is involved with a lot of famous commercial art as well. And then there's Jeff Koons, a postmodernist contemporary artist. A lot of his work is influenced by pop art and by popular culture, as well as the postmodern society, which we will be exploring in a lot greater depth. In our second half of the class, we have our last filmmaker director. That would be Tim Burton, known for his uniquely expressive and very visually distinctive style. Jean-Michel Basquiat, a Neo-Expressionism artist who brought a lot of street art into the fine art scene, and unfortunately did have a very early death as well. Yinka Shonibari, a contemporary artist who's using African clothing and textiles paired with traditional European cuts and designs to create a series of works that deal with colonialism and the impact of colonialism on the way the world, in fact, is structured and built. Damien Hirst, another postmodernist and contemporary artist who really likes to push the box have some fun with art, and also kind of make the kind of artworks that tend to push people's buttons. We will be talking about him in greater depth later on as well. So, those are the artists that you choose. Pick 3 from there, and then we'll talk about your assignments and what you're going to do with that at the end of this. And then our last thing for today is your art, what is it, good for lecture? Normally, whenever you have a lecture, what you would go to is you would go to your module, and you would go to your week participation questions. I'm going to leave it right here for a second. So you would go to that week's participation questions, and then while this lecture is being given, you would go to the Google form, and then while I am presenting, you can be filling out this participation guide. There is not going to be one for this week, but that will be starting with next week's presentation. So, we will go ahead and present this. Normally, anytime you see these orange questions right here, those are part of your week's presentation questions. So let me... Okay, so when you first open up the slide, what you should see is some of the questions for today. Anytime you see this orange, it should link up to a question that's within your Google form participation questions for that day. So today's ones don't have a Google form for them. It's totally fine. Just know that normally would be happening. These are usually to get you in the mood, to help you to practice with the question that you have for, or with the theme that you have for that day. So I'm willing to bet that at least some of you are coming into this class wondering why you even have to take art appreciation. Like, what is so important about art that it's still considered to be essential to your general education? You know, you had to take an art class to graduate from Wing It. And those are good questions to ask. I would also want to add to that, more importantly than any of those questions is like, how does knowing about art improve your life? How does understanding art that you see every day, even if you don't even notice it, how does understanding that art help you as an individual? Because you got to be in this class anyways. You might as well get something out of it. So this clip is from The Devil Wears Prada, and it kind of helps to illustrate the ways that art, and in this case fashion, permeates our experiences without us even realizing it. Now, if the volume doesn't work on this when I do the recording and the upload, you can always just pause this and go watch the original video in your box. So let me see if I can get this guy.
We have some right here, and then and I think it can be very interesting.
No, it's just baffling to me. Why is it so impossible to put together a decent run-through? You people have had hours and hours to prepare. It's just so confusing to me. Where are the advertisers?
We have some pieces from Banana Republic.
Well, we need more, don't we? Oh, this is lengthy. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, you know me. Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
But do you think it's too much like
La Croix from July? I thought that, but no, not with the right accessories. It should work.
Where are the belts for this dress? Why is no one ready?
Here. It's a tough call. They're so different.
Something funny?
No, nothing's, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me, I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh, okay, I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back, but what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns, and then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets. I think we need a jacket here. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Alright, so what that video very clearly demonstrates for us, let's see, where are we? Is how even when we don't think that our choices are the choices of the people who design the world that we live in, even when we don't think about those choices, we are still influenced every day by multi-billion-dollar industries who pour millions upon millions of dollars into figuring out ways to influence us in such convincing ways that we don't even notice it when it happens. And so, like, you know, if you use emojis or GIFs or memes or Snapchat or filters or anything like that, you're already communicating visually with the world. You know, you're using visual imagery to express yourself. So if you're already doing that, why not learn how to do it better and learn how to do it more intentionally? So at the most basic level, art is about communication. So what we in Western European derived culture designate in the category of art is a means of communicating ideas in a media that can be understood and make an emotional connection that goes beyond just the limitation of words. So we are communicating with one another. Even cultures who don't have a word for art still express themselves visually. We all do. So in the case of these Egyptian hieroglyphs right here, you have a lot of visual communication that's done in service of a story without even being able to read the words, because, you know, I can't read hieroglyphs. So let me see real quick. That's not in full screen anymore. There we are. So I can't read Egyptian hieroglyphs, but I can tell you some things about Egyptian culture just from this story. So for instance, we have the weighing of this nobleman's soul right here. His soul is being kept in this jar against the feather of Anubis. So of the feather of Mot, and Anubis is weighing the scales. So you have a culture wherein man or humanity is smaller than the gods, so he's less important than all the gods. He's also below the gods, so the man is underneath the rule of the rest of the pantheon of gods. He's also smaller than them, and he's also having his soul weighed, which means that the Egyptians believe in an afterlife. They believe in eternity. They also believe that your soul can be influenced by the things that you do in life, that you are corruptible, and that you will be held accountable by justice after you have died for your actions. You'll be counted against the lightness of the feather of truth. So your soul must be light. Your soul must be kept pure. And we know all of those things without having to read a little bit of text, just from the visual clues. Art communicates across cultures and languages. Making art is an instinctive, uniquely human urge that we use to express our highest aspirations. Understanding why and how art and design affects us allows us to understand our own humanity. You know, these are our first instincts in the world, is to express ourselves, to say that I was here. These tools allow us to show the ways that people can create aesthetic experiences to govern and manipulate our everyday experiences. So when you look at this, you immediately know that something's off, that Big Al's Harley Davidson Writing Club, when it's written in squirrely curly font, The font reminds you more of a girl's tea party than it does of Big Al's Harley Davidsons. You expect a font to communicate toughness. You expect a font, in this case, to communicate largeness. It's right there in the name. And for some reason, you know that this font doesn't communicate that. Why does the most successful fast food restaurant in the world use red and yellow as its identifying colors? Why do so many people feel a personal connection to the Mona Lisa? Neither of those things are random. McDonald's being red and yellow isn't an accident. It's the result of billions of dollars of testing. Mona Lisa being so popular isn't an accident. It's a result of very specific events in history. But all of these things have one thing in common, and the thing that they have in common is that you can trace their influences back to power. Art is powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have. We use it to communicate symbols of respect and obedience. We have an entire painting devoted to the divinely ordered right of Napoleon as the emperor, talking about all these clues and cues that are given to make you feel that Napoleon is the most important person who's ever walked the face of the planet. We use it to uplift the mundane and the ordinary, like we talked about with the realism artists. We use art to express ideals and personal mantras and universal truths, like the futurists believe. We use art to expose injustices and to inspire change, thinking about the photographers of the 1930s during the Dust Bowl. And we use art to express our feelings and emotions and connect with others on a common ground, thinking about how Frida Kahlo used art to communicate her very personal feelings and experiences. So from that, you really should just do this exercise mentally for yourself. And you don't have to do it for a participation question, but just think about this and how much you already know. So, Restaurant A is brightly lit, decorated in saturated primary colors. Placemats come with crayons to color them in, and the menu is in a laminated plastic material typed in Comic Sans. While Restaurant B is decorated with muted warm colors, the lighting is dim, with illumination only at each table. Each table is covered with a white tablecloth, and the dishes are simple. The menu is cardstock and is written in script. So, just think to yourself, how much money are you going to spend at option A? How often might you dine at option A versus how often are you going to dine at some place like option B? You know, what kind of occasions would you be going to option B to? What would you wear to option B? You know, what kind of food would you expect to see there? Would you feel like all of your kids might be welcome at option B? Would you feel comfortable bringing kids into option A? You know, there's all kinds of things that you already know, like how loudly you feel you can talk in one restaurant versus another, simply based on those visual cues. Really good thing to think about is how are you being communicated with visually. And then for you to watch in your own time, there is a cute little video from Looney Tunes about exploring a museum and the different visual art styles. I definitely encourage you to watch it, but I'm not going to play it in the course of this lecture. If you want to, you can pause right now and then go watch it. And that is the end of these lectures. So what you should be doing for the rest of this week, let me go back into student view for you. So for the rest of this week, a little bit of a delay. Yes. So student view. Go into your modules. So you've already done your lecture. We've gone through those. Your first reading comes from the section Composition and Art on the Sophia Tutorials PDF, and incidentally, your first written response is also from that PDF. So that would be response 1, Vincent van Gogh's Bedroom in Arles, a 1 to 2 page response in 12-point font, 1.5 spacing from your reading on composition and art, starting on page 5 follow the prompts and do an in-depth analysis of the painting of the bedroom in Arles by Vincent van Gogh. A thoughtful and thorough response is required to receive full points. So that means you don't just answer everything in one word or one sentence, because that's not going to give you a page to 2 pages. And when I say a page to 2 pages, it is not 3/4 of a page that has 5 headers. It's not, 1 3/4 of a page that's been double spaced or the margins cheated in. I do look at all those things, like your margins and your spacing and your headers. If you have too many headers, you're not going to get full points for your presentation. For your response. And those two both are corresponding to this Sophia Tutorials handout, the PDF right here. So expand that. Hopefully it will load. There we are. So this section, composition and art, they give a sample of some analysis stuff, some samples of things that you can talk about when you're talking about analyzing an artwork, and then you're going to respond to Vincent van Gogh's bedroom in Arles. And then you have those 2 to 3 elements in a principle that you think are emphasized in the work. And those should each be a paragraph a piece at a minimum, as well as your initial feeling upon seeing the work. And then, let's see, back to... There's one last thing, and then your practice quiz. So then you'll take your practice quiz right here. And this is pass fail. Just not answering the question is a 0 for that participation grade. So the first quiz is just did you answer the questions or did you not answer the questions? That's all you have to do. From here on out, it will be a little bit more involved than just answering or not answering. But for this particular one, your practice quiz, you either answer the questions or you don't answer the questions. So that is this week. If you have any other questions, you can let me know either through email or contact me through Canvas. Email is a little bit faster than that. So by Friday, you need to upload your practice quiz and you need to do your first response. And then come Monday, there will be a new lecture. Have a great week, guys, and I will talk to you soon.